I got the divorce papers by email while I was still in the desert. 13 years of marriage ended in a PDF attachment. The subject line said, "Let's be adults about this," as if that softened the blow. There were only 3 sentences in the message. She'd already filed the paperwork. She'd already emptied our joint account. She'd already moved her new boyfriend, Jeremy, into our house in Spokane. I stared at the screen in the corner of the barracks, a box fan humming behind me, pushing dry air across the sand-caked floor. My bunkmate Wilson was reading a book, legs crossed at the ankle, chewing sunflower seeds without looking up. I closed my laptop, didn't say a word, walked to the showers, the concrete cold beneath my boots, water pressure barely more than a drizzle. I let it hit the back of my neck until the skin prickled. Back in my bunk, I dried off, dressed, checked my gear. I replied to her email with one word: understood. No argument, no begging, no threats, just clarity. Because I'd known I didn't need a forensic accountant or a private investigator. I'd known 6 months before deployment that something had shifted. The way she stopped asking about my day, the way she lingered at work late into the night, claiming inventory duties she never had before, the new friends, the gym membership, that never left a sweat mark on her shirt. The passwords on her phone changed without explanation. I hadn't said anything then. I'm not the kind to accuse without proof. I don't scream, I don't throw things, but I see, I absorb, and I act when it counts. Wilson finally glanced over. "You good, man?" I nodded. "Just some stuff back home." He didn't press. Military guys know when to leave silence alone. I lay back in my cot and stared at the ceiling, counting the bullet holes in the aluminum panels above me, trying to remember how many times I'd seen her smile just for me. Not the forced smiles, not the public ones, but the ones that felt real. None came to mind. I slept with one boot still on and woke at 500 with a single word echoing in my head: finish. Wilson never asked again, and I never offered more. That's how it works out here. You don't bring your ghosts into the open unless they're screaming. Mine weren't. Not yet. They were quiet, tidy, folded into the creases of my uniform and the corners of my duffel bag. We're trained for composure. You lose your cool out here, you lose the mission. You lose people, so even when it's your life back home falling apart, you don't shout, you don't cry, you process, you calculate. And if you're smart, you prepare. 6 months before deployment, the signs were already there. Becky had started working late. Not sometimes, always. At first, I didn't question it. Life happens. Offices get busy. But then she started dressing differently. More makeup, heels I hadn't seen before. I asked about her new routine and she shrugged. "Just trying to feel better about myself," she said. I didn't press. Then came the gym membership. 3 days a week turned to 5. Her clothes would be freshly laundered but never sweaty. She never looked tired. Her texts grew shorter. Fewer hearts, no more photos of our dog napping on the couch. Just, okay, sure, busy tonight. I knew. So I did what I've always done before a mission. I ran prep. Quietly. Efficiently. I went to the storage unit across town and cleared a small corner for myself. Birth certificate, military records, VA loan documents, the marriage license, and house deed, all in my name as it had to be for the loan. But I'd added her back then as a gesture. Now I stored copies separately. My grandfather's watch, my mom's silver hairbrush set, anything I didn't want left in that house. I also opened a new checking account at a different bank. Nothing flashy. A few hundred here and there from my paychecks, rerouted under a nondescript label. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to start clean if I had to. The night before I deployed, she hugged me at the airport. "Stay safe," she whispered. Her arms were stiff, eyes dry. Like she was seeing off a coworker, not her husband. I should have known that was our real goodbye. I met Becky in the summer of 2010 at a buddy's barbecue just outside Spokane. I was back on leave between tours, sunburned, half exhausted, and not really in the mood to socialize, but she was there. Jeans, tank top, holding a paper plate like she owned the place. She had that kind of presence, confident, unbothered. She handed me a beer without asking what I drank. "You looked like you needed one," she said. We clicked fast, faster than I expected. She was studying nursing back then, but ended up taking a front desk job at a dental office for less stress, she said. "I'd rather manage people than wounds," she joked once. I didn't mind. I liked her laugh. I liked how she asked real questions about where I'd been, what I'd seen, without flinching. 8 months later, we were married at the courthouse. No big wedding, no fuss, just her sister and my old squad mate Jason as witnesses. It felt right, simple, solid. And when I deployed again the following year, she wrote letters, long ones, decorated in hearts like we were teenagers. We bought the house in 2014. 3 bedrooms, modest yard. Faded green siding I promised to replace and never did. It was mine, technically. VA loan. No joint signature allowed. But I added her to the deed 6 months later. She didn't ask. I just did it. That's what you do when you're building a life together. You share the roof, even if your name's the only one on the bricks. In those early years, she wore an army wife hoodie like it was a badge. She'd beam when people thanked me for my service. Kept a framed picture of us in my dress blues in the front hall right next to the coat rack. But over time, that pride began to fade. Her eyes didn't light up when I walked through the door. She stopped asking when I'd be back, stopped saying she missed me, and I, stupidly, thought we were just settling. That maybe this was what married life looked like after the honeymoon. Burned off. I never imagined she was burning the rest down behind my back. By the time I deployed for the 4th time, the space between Becky and me had stretched into something silent. Not hostile, just hollow. She stopped waiting up when I called from the base, stopped sending care packages. No more little notes tucked inside boxes of socks or jerky or photos of home. When we did talk, her voice was rushed, distracted. I'd ask how work was going and she'd say fine. Always fine. At first, I thought maybe she was just lonely. It's hard being a military spouse. Harder still to build a life that constantly pauses and resumes on someone else's schedule. I offered to take leave, skip the next tour, maybe find a stateside posting. "I didn't sign up to be a military wife," she said flatly. "I'm tired of being alone." That stuck with me, so I didn't argue. I just started adjusting my expectations. She started going out more, girls' nights, work retreats. I never met the girls. The gym membership became a constant in our budget, but I'd never seen her sweat. She stopped wearing her wedding ring on weekends. She said it irritated her finger. I didn't push, but I began planning. Small things at first. I rented a storage unit across town, moved some key documents there, my VA loan file, the original, house deed, my military pension paperwork. Stuff she probably didn't care about, but I did. I took my grandfather's pocket watch from the top drawer and tucked it inside an old ammo can, in that same unit, next to the last letter my mom ever wrote me before cancer took her. I also opened an account at a credit union she didn't know about. Every paycheck, a small portion got diverted there. Not enough to trigger questions, just a few hundred here and there. Call it insurance. A soft landing, if and when things fell apart. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Jason, who I'd trust with my life, because this wasn't a crisis yet. Not officially, but every instinct I had, the ones that kept me alive in cities full of roadside bombs and ambushes, told me the ambush here wouldn't come with noise. It'd arrive by silence. I was eating powdered eggs in the mess hall when my phone buzzed with a banking alert. Normally, I wouldn't check it during chow, but something about the vibration made me pause mid-bite. I opened the app out of habit, and then I froze. $80,500 gone. Withdrawn in one transaction. The joint savings account we'd built over a decade, drained down to a balance that wouldn't even cover lunch in a city airport. I didn't say anything. Didn't throw my tray or curse under my breath. I just set my fork down, locked my phone, and stared straight ahead while the din of voices and clatter of trays faded into a kind of static. Back in my bunk later, I logged into the bank again. Dug through the history. It wasn't just one swipe, it was a siphon job. Started the day after my deployment flight. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $600 there, spread across names I didn't recognize. Then, gradually, the amounts increased. $500, $4,000, then the kill shot. All timed just far enough apart not to trigger alarms, unless you were watching, and I had been watching. Every detail logged in silence. I made a list. Names on the transfers, dates, account numbers where I could find them. I flagged the activity with the bank's fraud department under a private inquiry. No accusations. Not yet. Later that night, while the rest of the unit talked about football scores and homecoming dates, I sat by the comms tent under the hum of a halogen lamp and called the bank from the satellite line. Becky had initiated all the transfers. Verified by her own login, her own IP address, her own security code. No hacking, no third party. Just a woman who had already left her marriage and was now bleeding its corpse for resources. I hung up and stood outside for a while, breathing in the diesel smoke and desert wind. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't race. Because I wasn't shocked. The only surprising thing was how long it had taken and how smoothly she executed it. But what she didn't know, what she'd never bothered to consider, was that I'd been preparing for this too, and I was better at strategy than she was at secrets. I waited until lights out when the tent was still and the bunks around me creaked with the slow breathing of exhausted men. I pulled out my laptop, turned the brightness low, and logged into the home security system Becky had insisted we install last year. She probably forgot I had access, or maybe she thought I wouldn't check. Either way, she wasn't hiding. The first image was the driveway. A truck I didn't recognize, beaten up, dented, oversized, sat where my sedan used to be. On the porch, a man stretched and sipped from a coffee mug. My mug, Seattle Seahawks logo faded on one side, handle chipped from where I'd dropped it in the sink 2 years ago. I zoomed in. My hoodie too, navy blue, slightly frayed at the sleeves. He wore it like it was his. A moment later, I saw him walking Scout, my dog, holding the same leash I'd used since we got her as a rescue pup. She trotted alongside him like she knew the routine. Then the kitchen feed. Becky stood at the stove, laughing. He came up behind her, kissed her cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he belonged there. I didn't feel rage, not heartbreak either. It was colder than that, sharper, like ice finding the edges of broken glass. I closed the feed, reached into the locker beside my bunk, and pulled out my notebook. I started writing. Call. James. Military law background. Check VA pension protections. Pull refinance documents Becky mentioned in passing last year. Audit all accounts. Confirm house deed is still locked. Backup security footage to cloud. Secure legal access to truck, pension assets. Find a quiet place to stay after return. Every item written with calm precision. This wasn't a list of retaliation. It was preparation. The same way I'd planned raids in Afghanistan. Quiet, thorough, unemotional. She'd chosen her path. Now, I was choosing mine. And I don't start fights, but I always finish them. The diner James picked was the kind of place that hadn't changed in 30 years. Laminated menus, coffee served in chipped white mugs, and a waitress named Carol who called everyone honey. I sat in the corner booth, back to the wall, sipping black coffee that tasted like burnt hope. James slid into the seat across from me without a word, set a manila folder on the table and nodded once. Everything we discussed, he said, tapping the folder. I opened it slowly. Inside were bank statements, mortgage documents, notary logs, pages of my life reshaped by someone else's hand. At the very top, clipped separately, was a refinance application. That's not my signature, I said before he even asked. I didn't need to compare it to the real one on my license or enlist a handwriting analyst. I could feel it in my gut. James flipped the paper toward me. She forged it 3 months ago, used your military absence as cover, got a loan for $330,000 against the house. Jeremy Ryan is listed as co-applicant. I stared at the line where my name had been printed. in clean block letters and then traced over with a fraudster's hand. The loop on the N was too clean. The tail on the H curved instead of hooked. She didn't even try that hard. She used the equity to fund her little escape plan, James said. Jeremy's background is trash. 2 DUIs and a fraud charge. From 2019, she turned our home into capital for a con. Exactly, he said. And it gets better. According to title records, they filed this without a spousal notification waiver. That's another violation. I clenched my jaw. All those years, all that trust. She didn't just leave, she gutted the floorboards on her way out. James leaned forward. You have options, Nate. We're talking criminal fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. The loan is null if you challenge it, but more than that, we can stop whatever she's planning with that money. I looked back down at the fake signature. I'd faced ambushes with less clarity than I felt now. This wasn't a divorce, I said quietly. It was a heist. James nodded. Then let's make sure the getaway car never leaves the garage. The first time I heard the name Daniel. Spencer. I was sitting in the bank manager's office, staring at a list of outbound wire transfers tied to the refinance account. Spencer? I asked, squinting at the name. Who the hell is that? The manager. A stiff man named Parker who clearly didn't enjoy conversations outside of mortgage rates, adjusted his tie and said, A real estate agent. Your ex-wife transferred money to him in multiple transactions, roughly $1,400 total. Looks like earnest money. I leaned back, the ceiling fan above me squeaking softly. She's selling the house, I said. She forged my signature, took a loan out against the house, and now she's lining up a buyer. Parker nodded without emotion. Looks that way. By the time I left the bank, I had a new name to add to my list. Daniel Spencer. I called James as soon as I got back to the car, still parked in the shade across the street. He answered on the second ring. I need a background check on someone, I said. Name's Daniel Spencer, real estate agent, Spokane area. James didn't hesitate. Give me an hour. It took 45 minutes. Got him, he said. Spencer's license is clean, but his client history is not. 3 recent sales linked to Jeremy Ryan, 2 of them from women going through military divorces. Same pattern every time. Boyfriend moves in, pushes for refinance. Then Spencer lists the house as a cash-only deal below market value. And Jeremy gets a kickback? Almost certainly, James said. All off the books through shell companies. One woman from San Diego ended up homeless. Her lawyer flagged Spencer, but nothing stuck. Until now. My chest felt hollow. This wasn't just betrayal. It was predatory, practiced. And I wasn't the first. James continued. This is bigger than civil court. I'm calling Agent Patel at the FBI, Financial Crimes Division. VA loan fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud across state lines. They'll bite. I stared at the dashboard. The air conditioning hummed softly. I'd gone from betrayed husband to witness in a criminal investigation. And somehow the shift felt natural. I'm not out for blood, I said finally, but I want the truth exposed. And that, James replied, is exactly what they need. Becky thought she was orchestrating a clean handoff, that I was still dazed somewhere in deployment limbo, letting her take the house, the money, the life we built, like it was a gym bag she'd forgotten she never paid for. That morning I sat across from James at a Greasy Spoon diner outside Spokane. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. Becky had sent a message the night before. Let's talk in person, she wrote. Meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow. James took a sip of his own cup and shook his head. Don't go. I'm not, I said. But I want to see what she's doing while she thinks I'm there. At 9:30 a.m., we parked 3 houses down from mine. The driveway was just barely visible through a gap between evergreens. 9:45, Becky walked out, got in her car, and pulled away in the direction of the park. James raised an eyebrow. Now what? Now, I said, pulling out my phone. We watch. The security feed loaded in seconds. I'd installed cloud cameras the year before. One tucked in the porch light, one in the living room clock, another in the hallway near the guest bedroom, Becky hadn't remembered. Why would she? They were my project, not hers. At 10:12, a sedan pulled into the driveway. White, modest, but the logo on the door gave it away. Daniel Spencer, realtor. 2 minutes later, Jeremy stepped outside to greet him. They shook hands like they were old business partners. Then both disappeared inside. James leaned closer. We recording? Every second. On the feed, Spencer held up a tablet, panning across the kitchen. Jeremy pointed at walls, cabinets, windows. You'll list at $470, Spencer said. Buyer comes in at $420. Clean deal, cash, everybody wins. What about the husband? Jeremy asked. Spencer shrugged. Military guys always bluster. They've got deployments, pensions. He'll take a check to walk away. That was the line I needed. I forwarded the feed to Agent Patel with a short caption, happening now. At 10:47, the first unmarked SUV rolled up the street. Then another. Then a black van. We watched from the car as agents in jackets stepped out, moving fast and quiet. Jeremy and Spencer didn't even make it to the porch before they were cuffed. At 11:03, Becky pulled up, grocery bags in hand. Her mouth dropped open when she saw the flashing lights and agents hauling boxes out the front door. I didn't move. I just watched. Not out of vengeance, but justice. Justice wrapped in quiet planning and a feed that never stopped recording. She stood just outside the courthouse conference room, her posture stiff, arms crossed tightly over her chest like armor. Her lawyer, a sharp-featured man with a too-new briefcase, whispered something, but she didn't respond. Through the glass, I could see the tight lines around her mouth. Becky was unraveling. Inside, James opened the folder again and slid 3 documents across the table. The trust deed, forged refinance signature, and a copy of the surveillance transcript. FBI already has the originals. We're submitting these into evidence, but you've got the opportunity to resolve this without a courtroom. Becky's lawyer gave her a sideways glance. She nodded, reluctantly, and stepped inside. She didn't look at me. I kept my voice low and steady. Here's what I'm offering. You sign a written confession stating you authorized the fraudulent refinance. You return $88,500 of the funds transferred into your name. You waive any claim to the house, the pension, and any joint property. In return, I don't press charges. Her lawyer leaned in. You're threatening criminal prosecution as leverage, James. Didn't blink. No threats, just a choice. We already have a federal case. You know what's waiting outside that settlement. Becky opened the folder, scanned the confession form. This paints me like I was in on all of it, she muttered. You forged my name, I said quietly. You signed for a man you barely knew to co-own a home you didn't build. You emptied our savings. You can argue ignorance, but the truth's right there in the wire transfers and video footage. For a moment, the room was silent. I didn't know about Daniel Spencer, she said finally. I didn't know Jeremy was flipping houses like that. I thought we were just starting over. Then you were used, James replied. Or you were complicit. Either way, you have a chance to walk away with dignity. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the pen. She signed the confession. Then the settlement. She still hadn't looked at me. When it was done, she stood, shoulders slumped, and walked out of the room without another word. I didn't follow. Didn't gloat. Didn't even breathe until the door clicked shut behind her. Because there, in that silence, was the only apology I was ever going to get. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address beyond a zip code in Fort Worth, Texas. At first, I thought it was another bill or a follow-up from one of the agencies. I almost tossed it on the table unopened. But something about the careful handwriting made me pause. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook. The handwriting was neat, looped and slanted right. A woman's hand. You don't know me, it began, but you saved our home. I sat down slowly, the edges of the paper trembling between my fingers. My husband is in the Navy, she wrote. We've been stationed all over. Virginia, San Diego, Okinawa. I stayed in Fort Worth during this deployment, pregnant with our second child. It was supposed to be a quiet year, safe. Instead, someone came to the door with a smile and a pitch. About selling fast, flipping our home, making it work for both of us while my husband was overseas. The pressure started slow, but it grew. I almost signed. She didn't say Jeremy's name or Spencer's, but she didn't need to. The FBI showed up 3 days before we were set to finalize. They told me everything about the fake equity, the cash deals, the pattern. They said your case was the one that helped them see it clearly, that you didn't just protect yourself, you exposed them. I read that paragraph twice. They gave me your name, I hope you don't mind. I just needed to say thank you. You fought back when it would have been easier to give up, and because of that, our family gets to stay whole. She signed it simply. Lindsay J., Fort Worth. I folded the letter gently, pressed it flat against the kitchen table, and reached for a magnet, pinned it to the refrigerator door, next to an old photo of my squad and a postcard from Missoula. Some days, when the silence in my cabin gets too loud, when the past creeps in around the edges, I read that letter again. And I remember that even shattered things can leave behind something steady, something that shelters someone else. The cabin sits 10 miles from the nearest town, nestled at the edge of a pine forest, with a creek that runs behind it in the spring and turns to frost in the winter. The porch faces west, and in the evenings I sit there with a mug of strong coffee, my dog Scout stretched out beside me, and let the day end in silence. There's a kind of stillness out here that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. No sirens, no engines. Just the breeze running through the tall grass and the occasional crack of a branch under an elk's hoof. Some mornings I wake up and forget for a moment that my life ever looked different, that there was once a marriage, a house in Spokane, a war overseas, and a betrayal waiting for me on the other side of both. But I don't forget on purpose. I just don't revisit it often. The Army gave me structure, gave me meaning, but it also gave me walls, ones I didn't realize I carried into my personal life. When Becky left, when she tried to take everything, I could have let it turn me into someone hard, someone angry. I didn't. Justice had its time. The courts, the FBI, the final papers signed at a conference table where no one smiled. That chapter ended the day Becky agreed to the settlement and walked out without apology. I haven't seen her since. Don't. Need to. What came after is mine. I work with my hands now. Build chairs, tables, cabinets for neighbors who drive up the gravel road and pay in cash or venison. Sometimes I carve for no one but myself. Old oak or cedar, shaped slow and careful. I sand the wood down until it feels smooth under my fingers. Until it feels like something finished. Scout watches me from the corner, ears twitching to distant bird song. I get letters now and then, one from a Navy wife in Texas, another from a Marine sergeant in San Diego who heard my story. People who almost lost everything the way I did, but didn't, because someone decided not to stay quiet. Some nights I open that first letter again, the one pinned on the fridge. The papers started to curl at the corners, but the words are still there. You saved our home. I didn't do it for revenge, I did it because peace is something worth building, and what I've built now can't be taken.